Hello and welcome back to another video. So today's video is inspired by BookTok because I don't know about you, but I spend way too much time on TikTok and BookTok takes a good chunk of my For You page. So I'm constantly watching people talk about books. So there are some books I'm constantly listening to people talk about, but I personally never read them and I'm kind of curious about, either because the plot seems interesting or just because I have FOMO. So I guess you could say this video is also brought to you by my FOMO because
20 minutes later.
So, welcome to the reading vlog of me spending a week just reading BookTok books. So, I have three that I plan to read on this week. So, the first one is one I'm the most curious about, and it is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. So, I don't really know what this book is about. I know it involves someone investigating a murder. And that's all I know about the book, so I am really excited to read this one. The second book I'm a little bit more apprehensive about because it is fantasy and I'm not much of a fantasy reader. When it comes to magical stories, I'm way more into the sci-fi than the fantasy. Actually, the last time I read fantasy, I think I was like 10 or 11 with Twilight, so it's been a while. And this book in specific, it is about fairies, and the last time I consumed fairy content was Tinkerbell, and these fairies are not like Tinkerbell, so let's see if I like it. And basically the book, it is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, and I heard good things about it, so I went to read this book and know what the fuss is about with Cardan. And the third book I plan to read, it is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. So yeah, I also don't know much about this book except that there is a library and the main character travels through space and time through books. So that being said, let's get into reading the books and finding out what they are about. Yes, it's been more than a week since I filmed the first clip, but to be honest, the first time I finished this book discussion, my book opinions, the clip ended up with such a thing that I tried to edit the best I could, but I still couldn't fix, and I decided I'm just recording this because I hope this will get better and the image will be better. But that being said, let's go back to the books because I read all three of them. First, I read A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. If I'm looking below, it's because I have my notes here. A Good Girl's Guide to Murder is a YA thriller that follows Pippa. She's a 17-year-old high school student that decides to investigate a murder that shocked her little town in England. And she does this under the pretense that it is a school project. Does Pippa do some things that are quite questionable and not very safe? Yes, but also she is 17. That being said, as this book will suggest, the condition it ended up in, I had quite a bit of fun with this book. It was way more entertaining than I expected. During around the second half of this book, I literally couldn't put it down. This book was way more entertaining than I imagined. It was also very well crafted and well written. There were so many plot twists, and the thing about the plot twists is that they were not plot twists. Wow, I couldn't see coming, because you could, because there were hints, there were signs that that plot twist could happen, but there were so many things going on at the same time that you just, it's not that you forget it, but there were so many things hinting for something totally different that your mind would automatically go to, oh yeah, no, this, like, we have these few hints, so it's not possible. But in the end, it is possible. And I think what makes this book so good, besides being entertaining, it is really really a really well-crafted story. It's a really well-crafted narrative, and I'm impressed. I didn't expect to like this book so much. I already bought the sequels and the prequel to this book, and I do want to read Holly Jackson's new release, which I think is called 5/5. But safe to say, I was converted to the fandom of this book. I understand the hype. I think it deserves the hype. Moving on to the next book I read, and that one is The Midnight Library by the Mad Haig. The first thing to say about this book is that it needs a trigger warning, because this happens at the beginning of the book, and this is something essential to the narrative. That it is the main character, she tries to unalive herself. Another thing is that this book is fantasy, and I wasn't expecting that, and that's not a complaint. Before I go into my opinions, let's talk about what this book is about. The Midnight Library follows Nora. She's a 30-something-year-old that, due to family problems, money problems, professional problems, she decides to unalive herself. And after doing so, she gets stuck in this sort of limbo that takes the form of a library that is constantly stuck at exactly 000 a.m., exactly midnight. It is basically a limbo somewhere in between life and death. And while she is on the limbo, she has the opportunity to visit countless lives she could have had if she had made one simple different decision in her life. And she can keep visiting those lives for as long as she wants, until she finds the life that is perfect for her, or she decides she no longer wants to live. And I'm sorry if my description of the plot sounds very confusing to you. It's just that it is quite a confusing plot to explain. But if for some reason it sounds interesting to you, I do recommend this book, because this is another one. I was surprised how much I enjoyed it. It also honestly took a bit of time to get through this book, which was also surprising because it is not a very long book. My edition is around 300 and something, 300 and my edition is 306 pages long, and it actually surprisingly took a bit of time to get through it. Not that much, but still more than I was expecting. Besides the need for a trigger warning, the only other complaint I would have about this book is that the length, for me, it felt a bit weird. I think it could have been either way longer and explored way more of this subject, or ideally it would have been a tiny bit shorter, because in the middle it got a bit repetitive, but that's the only thing. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars, and I do understand the hype, and I think it honestly, it is well deserved. So now let's go to the third book I read for this video. The book that might or might have not have converted me into a fantasy girly. And the book that is my favorite book I read for this video, which is saying something because I really enjoyed the first 2 books. And before I delve into it, I think at the beginning of the video I said I don't consume fairy content, but I was completely wrong, because upon further analysis of my media consuming habits, I consumed and I still consumed a fair bit of fairy content. I was a Wings fan. I watched the live action Wings. I watched a lot of fairy godparents as a kid, and it turns out I really enjoy fairies. I just wasn't aware of how much I like fairies and fairy stories. But going back to the book, you probably already know it's The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This is a fantasy novel and the first book in the Folk of the Air trilogy. It follows Jude. She is a human that moves to the fairy kingdom as a little kid. At this first book, we follow her quest to fit in, to find her place in this fairy kingdom where she kind of doesn't belong, but at the same time she does belong because she grew up there. But also she's trying to achieve some kind of power in order for her to have a little bit more peace, be a little bit more respected in the fairy realm. Overall, this book was way more focused on the politics of the fairy kingdom rather than the romance, and I really enjoyed that. I like that the romance was just a subplot that I think we'll be able to follow and see how it grows throughout the next books. But yeah, I like that it was more focused on the politics than TikTok would make you believe it is. But still, there is like a sprinkle of romance between Jude and Carden, and honestly, that was one of the reasons I decided to read this book, because people always rave about Carden, and in this first book I started to get why. I hope there will be more development in the next two books in the series, but I understand a bit why people enjoyed Jude and Carden. It's a fun subplot. It is the right sprinkle, the right amount of sprinkle, and it's just so wonderful. Overall, it took me a few chapters to get into this book, but after I did, there was no putting down this book. I absolutely love this book. I already bought the sequels. I will be reading the sequels, and for me this is a 5-star read. So that's it for the 3 BookTok popular, the 3 most recent books BookTok convinced me to read, and I think this is the best selection, my favorite selection of books I read so far, because I loved every single one of them. The ones that have sequels, I will be reading the sequels. I already bought the sequels, like I finished reading and I was already ordering the sequels because they're just so good. And yeah, that is for the video. If you liked it, give a like, subscribe, and I will see you soon, probably talking about books again.